Hello and welcome to Smaulgld's Russian Central Bank Gold Reserve Update for the month of July 2018. Russia adds another 25 tons of gold to reserves in July. The Russian Central Bank gold reserves rise to 1,968.85 tons in July. Russian gold reserves are now the fifth largest in the world, and they added 800,000 ounces of gold, or approximately 25 tons, to reserve in July. Russia added a record 224 tons of gold to reserves last year in 2017, and so far this year through July, Russia has added 130 tons of gold. Now, since July 2015, the Central Bank of Russia has added over 670 tons of gold to her reserves. Now, the overall Russian reserve position rose from 456 billion in June to 458 billion in July. Russian holdings of US Treasuries are now down in the about $15 billion range. They're out of the top holders of US Treasuries. They're not even in the top 50 anymore. At one point, just 6 months ago, they held about 100 billion of US Treasuries. Now, the gold reserves that Russia has, the 1,969 tons, are worth $77.4 billion, or just shy of 17% of their overall overall foreign reserves. And don't forget, you want to add mugs to your reserves, you can get the Smaulgld Super Classic mug that you're looking at right now, which is $23.99 with free shipping in the continental United States, or you can go for the Smaulgld Classic bold double-sided cup Smaulgld cryptocurrencies, economics, gold, and silver mug for $19.99 with free shipping in the continental United States. Now, Russian gold reserves are on the rise while their U.S. Treasury holdings shrink. And that gap has gotten smaller and smaller to the point now where Russia holds more in dollar value in gold than they hold in U.S. Treasuries. Although we understand that they may hold a large dollar position, but not in the securities, but just in cash reserves. But let's take a look here. You can see the red line marks the United States Treasuries that Russia was holding, and you can see in May of 2017 they had 108 billion. In November of 2017 they had 105. As recently as March of 2018 they had 81 billion. But now their gold reserves are in the $80 billion range. Interestingly enough, even though they've added gold the last few months, the value of their gold reserves has dropped under 80 billion down to 77 billion as a result of the price of gold declining. So even though Russia's added about 40 tons of gold the last couple of months, their overall value of the gold reserves has gone down despite that addition. Now, at the end of 2017, Russia ended with 1,832 tons. As we've mentioned, they've added about 130 tons. They added 7.2 million ounces last year, about 224 tons. So far this year, they've added about 18 tons a month. At this pace, they'll add about 222 tons. So they're almost on the same pace, identical pace, as they were last year. And you can see from this chart here, from June 2015 all the way to July 2018, they've added nearly 700 tons of gold. So quite a robust gold acquisition program. Now, it wasn't always that way. This chart shows Russian gold acquisitions and dispositions since 1994. And from 1998, 99, 2000, they actually sold gold. 2001, they added a little. 2002, they sold. 2003, they bought. 2004, they sold. 2005, they didn't do anything. But ever since 2006, they've been adding gold. And most of it they've been adding the last 4 years. averaging over 200 tons of gold since 2014. If you want to add gold to your own stack, you can do so through the Smaulgld site or through the links below this BitChute and YouTube at Golden Eagle Coins, SD Bullion, and Money Metals Exchange. You can compare pricing and shipping. And the good news is if you click on those links, you'll pay no more, no less than if you visited those sites directly. And Smaulgld, yours truly, will get a small gold commission. Don't get that in dollars, but it is a small commission. It does help out the site. So if you're interested in buying gold, silver, or other precious metals, it's not investment advice that you buy them, but if you are going to buy them or just consider buying them, do your research and you can check out the prices at 3 quality websites. Now, since 2009, Russia's added over 1,100 tons of gold, which is more than China, which has only added about 775 during the same period. When I say China, I mean the People's Bank of China. Clearly, the country of China has imported, added, mined more gold than that the People's Bank of China has on its balance sheet. Indeed, they've mined and imported well over 10,000 tons. But that doesn't all end up at the People's Bank of China. It ends up at other state-owned banks, state-owned entities, sovereign wealth funds, and wealthy individuals. But here's a chart that I keep on a monthly basis. This shows the monthly additions that Russia adds, and there's a couple of months where they take a breather, but I think that's normally when they think they've met their target for the year. It looks like this year's target is about 220 tons. And most months, I guess they average sometimes 500,000 ounces, or this month 800,000 ounces, which was about 25 tons. They have on occasion imported over 1 million ounces a month. But it seems like it's all designed to get them in the 200 ton a year range the last 3 years. And here's a chart just showing the pace of Russian central bank acquisitions versus the People's Bank of China's acquisitions. And I don't keep the chart anymore because the People's Bank of China stopped reporting adding gold reserves in October 2016, coincidentally the same year that the Chinese yuan joined the strategic special drawing rights SDR basket from the IMF in 2016. That doesn't mean, again, that China itself doesn't have gold, isn't adding gold. It just means the People's Bank of China either isn't reporting it or they're not adding it. And I would tend to think it's the latter. They're probably just not adding gold to the People's Bank of China. The reason I say that is their overall gold reserves since October 2016 have declined by almost $1 trillion. So you would expect that they probably sold off a lot of assets for whatever reason, which we won't get into now, but they probably weren't adding gold at the time. All right, and one thing we have to mention about Russia here is they are a significant gold producer. Here's their mining production versus what their central bank adds, and you can see last year 224 tons added out of 260 tons mined. So Russia, as we've talked about in the past, has a weak currency, but they're lucky enough to be able to turn that weak currency, the ruble, into gold, and it looks like they are doing that. Now the remaining gold they had been shipping to China. They have an agreement with China to ship the additional gold to China, and also this year they started shipping some of that gold to India, but there's not much left over after they take their cut of what they want to add to their central bank gold reserves. Last year they added almost 90% of their gold mining. Now Russia does have an arrangement with China to help finance some additional gold mines in Russia. And here's where Russia ends up in the top 10 gold holding nations. These are what the numbers the central banks report to the IMF. They're not necessarily audited. You can't trust any of the numbers any more than you can trust when someone tells you how much gold they have. You have no idea whether any of these countries have what they say. People tend to get conspiratorial and they say the United States doesn't have any, China has more than the United States, and that's merely a function of getting a lot of commentators just saying it. They don't know. The explanation for China not having a large amount is that China is not China. Just like Giuliani says truth isn't truth, there is a difference here with China. This is the People's Bank of China. This is not all of China's gold. And so, for example, India, who's fallen off this chart because Turkey has moved up, the Central Bank of India, the Reserve Bank of India, lists 557 tons of gold. Now, estimates range from about 18,000 to 24,000 tons of gold that are in the country of India. But of course, it's not all at the Central Bank of India. It doesn't even necessarily belong to the Indian government. Same with China. Lots of gold in China, lots of gold mined in China, lots of gold imported into China. But the People's Bank of China says they have 1,843 tons on their balance sheet. We don't know that they have any of it. Same with the United States. People say they're sure the United States doesn't have any. There's no one who has any evidence to say that they don't have it. Just because you don't have an audit of the gold doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. There are people who say they've seen it, and there's people who say they haven't seen it. Still, seeing is not even believing. And if somebody sees a pile of something, unless someone goes through and marks every bar and assays every bar, you really can't tell. But you also can't say that the United States doesn't have any gold. And the reason I get upset about when people say that is if having gold was so important, the United States easily can print dollars and buy it. For example, we just learned today that Russia's big 1969 gold hoard is only worth $77 billion. Do you think the United States couldn't come up, the Treasury couldn't come up with $77 billion if it was important enough to have 2,000 tons of gold, that they couldn't come up with it and buy it? And you would say, well, they could never get away with buying that much. Of course they could. India imports 1,000 tons a month, 1,000 tons of gold a year, and the price of gold doesn't go anywhere. So the idea the United States doesn't have any gold is foolish for a couple of reasons. One, you don't know that. Two, if it was important for them to have it, they can easily buy it at the prices that exist. It just doesn't make any sense. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be skeptical about any of these numbers. What people tend to do is there's this gold pumper narrative. China good, has gold. US stupid, bad, doesn't have gold. That's just believing what you want to believe. There's no evidence on either side that how much gold China actually has at the People's Bank of China. And there's no evidence that the United States doesn't have the gold that it says it has. But it's very fashionable to say, ha, 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 I have more gold than the United States has. And I don't know why you would believe that, other than you've just heard a lot of people say it online. All right, well, that about does it. Here's the Russian Treasury holdings. You can see everyone was saying Russia's dumping treasuries. They weren't. They finally did, but they weren't when everybody was saying it. So maybe they had some predictive analysis, or maybe they realized it might make sense. And the reason Russia can dump treasuries, and they don't really need dollars. They don't do a lot of trade with the United States. And maybe they still have a lot of dollars. We don't know their exact breakdown, but they just don't have the US Treasuries anymore. But they have built up a decent reserve position of nearly $500 billion, about $500 billion. All right, that about does it for today. Make sure you join me each and every night at 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on YouTube, where we do a live stream covering a variety of topics. Haven't picked tonight's topic yet, but be sure to tune in. Certain to have something very interesting for you. Also, don't forget to pick up your Smaulgld travel mug, or your Smaulgld super classic mug, or your Smaulgld classic mug. And don't forget to become a Smaulgld patron, or to donate to Smaulgld via PayPal or Bitcoin. I was going to say BitChute, no, but Litecoin or Ethereum. So thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you tonight.